Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So in this one we have a pretty big piece of news, and that is 10 preview pages for the upcoming Avatar comic Ashes of the Academy. So obviously the book's coming out 25th of March 2025, so we were expecting these pretty much any day now because the preview pages always do come out about 4 months before the book releases. So this is actually perfectly on schedule, and 10 is pretty much on the higher end of preview pages that we do tend to get. So they don't appear to just be 10 pages all completely in a row. There seems to be quite a few skips here. So the preview seems to give us a sense for what is going on in, I'm going to guess, probably the first third of the book. It's hard to judge how many pages are between each kind of section here. But yeah, let's jump into it here. I'll have the pages open a little bit bigger so we can go through them clearly. Okay, so we open up with this page here. So obviously we're in front of the Royal Fire Academy for Girls. Ursa is worried about Kiyi's first day here, obviously. And it's just Zuko trying to assure her that things are not the same in the Fire Nation, but they're also not the same in the Fire Academy as they were under Ozai and the other Fire Lords. Very interesting dialogue here. I regretted sending Azula here. The Academy really brought out the worst in her. I'm not sure Kiyi should be here either. Now, for one, my thoughts on this is probably that, like, I'm not sure how much of a, ability to decide where Azula went in terms of school Ursa actually had. Everything, I think, from the search and the backstory highlights that Ozai would have made that decision and Ursa basically just had to go along with it. That with what we know of the Royal Fire Academy for Girls, there was no way Azula wasn't going to go here. But obviously it highlights Ursa sort of knew the reputation of the school kind of back then, and that in her mind, even though maybe Azula was heading in a direction like that, that this didn't help her when it came to what Azula kind of became in a way over time, which is quite interesting. And obviously Zuko's trying to highlight that, things are different now. It's not as harsh as it once was. He's the Fire Lord. Believe in me, and she will try to. So yeah, Zuko opens the gates. Very interesting because, like, is this the first time we're getting to see Zuko done in Peter Wortman's style? Well, I suppose we saw him at the end of Suki Alone, but in terms of the comic era, I think it might be. But anyway, we jump into the next one, which I'm guessing is the next page. So Kiyi appears here, of course, with the parents, of course, and she's excited, and we get introduced to her friend here, whose name is Lihua. Now, interesting, if you go to this speech bubble, you note the kind of double asterisks, and it's like, wait, what dialogue is that from Ursa? It seems to be a note from, I'm guessing, Faith Aaron Hicks, to approvals, basically. So this obviously got pushed through as, like, the preview page without them realizing that, like, it's not actual dialogue. So if we read it, I'm so glad Lihua is here with her. It means a lot. That is the line of dialogue. The rest of it is just a note. I was thinking Lihua could be the little girl with the pigtails who was kidnapped by Azula and May's dad in Smoke and Shadow. I couldn't find a name for her in those books, so I picked out a new name. So this is just highlighting, how does Kiyi have a friend who is a similar age to her? Well, she met a bunch of kids around her age during the events of Smoke and Shadow, and we're sort of highlighting here that one of those girls, the one who had kind of pigtails, is now her kind of friend. Now, obviously, we still don't know how much time gap there is between Smoke and Shadow and where we are here, which is like post-imbalance or in or around imbalance. Some people say it's only a couple of months. Some people go as far as a year. It's kind of hard to judge, and this book might actually maybe give us a little bit of a sense into that. We're going to see that Kiyi, for instance, seems to have a decent control over her firebending, highlighting that she's, I guess, at least done some training since Smoke and Shadow. So at the very least, a couple of months later here is when this stuff is happening. hard to judge otherwise, basically. But yeah, that's obviously, it also gives you an insight into how the comics actually get made. When it comes to naming stuff and introducing new characters, it's sort of like, oh yeah, like, hey, can this character be that character? Is that okay? Or does that mess up anything? Types thing, the approvals of the comics. So yeah, we point out this idea that I'm glad she's here too. The school should have opened its doors to all Fire Nation citizens long ago, obviously highlighting the idea of the Royal Fire Academy was for the nobles, the high up people in society, to forge them into the sort of quote unquote ruthless kind of leaders that the Fire Nation needed under previous Fire Lords, basically. And of course, Ursa can see the kind of folly in this, basically, with the idea that, oh, if everyone was allowed in, it would undermine our country's great traditions, and we can't have that. Things are different now, and it is better for the Fire Nation. We need to make some new traditions, like teaching the Academy students exactly what happened during the 100-Year War and the Fire Nation's role in it. And Ursa points out that there are going to be a few parents who are not excited about that prospect, but it is something that you have to do. And so this seems to be a little bit of a theme of this, is that there are some people in the Fire Nation who are okay with this radical change. Other people kind of just want to sweep it almost like under a rug and just keep things roughly the way they used to be. And it's very fascinating because to a certain degree, you have to be thinking about the headband episode from ATLA, where Aang went to a Fire Nation school, obviously not one of the Royal Academies, but he went to a school, and we got to see a little bit of this. And obviously the idea is that the Academy was that kind of taken to an extreme, but we'll move on. So clearly a bit of a cut here, because immediately suddenly like Zuko has gone up and is now talking to the headmistress of the Academy. She has reservations about the new curriculum, and the Academy must not coddle its students. They're the future of the Fire Nation. And Zuko points out, it's not coddling, I'm trying to ensure the future as well, but a future that looks very different from what my father imagined. I expect you to follow my instructions. So Zuko being a clear leader, trying to like be strong about the decisions that he's made, while also, of course, making those decisions in the aim of a different future for the Fire Nation. So cool stuff there. And so yeah, it's about just welcoming in the year. We see that Kiyi is just extremely excited, whereas Lihua is actually a bit scared about this, kind of highlighting, I guess, maybe Kiyi doesn't maybe know as much about the reputation of the Academy, whereas maybe some of the other girls kind of do, and they wouldn't usually be going here. But hey, the opportunity arose now that it's open to everyone. I'm a bit scared and worried about what is going to happen here, which seems to be kind of found to be correct, because we seem to cut to this. I don't know what this is. Is this just messing about during like playtime? Is this some sort of a training exercise? But either way, it's Kiyi and Lihua and one of the upperclassmen, I'm guessing, from a year up or something like that, someone who's been in the school longer, attacks Lihua, sends her kind of falling from the kind of jungle gym thing here. She falls to the ground. Kiyi gets a bit angry here. Fire bends up, and the girl falls, and then she follows her down with this like fire punch, and we don't get to see what actually happens here. So obviously it speaks to the idea, again, like I said, Kiyi has trained a bit to be able to use her fire bending when she needs to. She can do a bit of a stream of fire, but she can also just make her fist kind of have fire around it. So they're obviously getting across the idea, like, she also is from a good firebending bloodline, because again, Ursa's related to Roku, so there is a strong bloodline there, even if she doesn't have the sort of like the royalty kind of bloodline also kind of in her, but she's definitely still strong. So want to see what happens here. Like, does she just KO this girl, or does this girl somehow manage to reverse it? We don't know what happens. Does Kiyi get in trouble? That's going to be an interesting one, because one of the things the description for the book says is that, like, it's sort of like, will Kiyi go down the same path as her half-sister Azula, and presenting basically the idea of situations like that where you have to defend yourself with fighting, like pseudo Agni Kai type things. do we really want that in the schools at that young of an age? And you can maybe see the idea of like, if we don't change things, like maybe that's what will happen, and it will just remain having the same reputation it used to have. So, another talk between Zuko and the headmistress. I'm wondering if you're the right headmistress for this school. And she just tries to kind of point out that, hey, the people who send their kids here, they're all influential citizens, you know. They support me, basically, for the good of their children. Are you sure you want to go against that, basically? And his response is just like, oh yeah, I'm bringing in a new teacher. Who is it? It's May, of course, you know. Perhaps you remember her, Governor Ukano's daughter. I think she'll be a good addition to the school. And she remembers her. Not the most motivated student, but definitely from the right family. I'd be happy to take her under my wing as a new teacher. And then Zuko, this is a really fun one, because you can see he's smiling, he's grinning as he says this. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to return to the academy, which is especially funny because, as we'll get in the next page, he hasn't told her yet, because as we cut to the next page, this is him telling her. So he's agreed to make it happen before he's told her about it, which I think speaks to, obviously, I guess they have a pretty good relationship at this point, that he's willing to kind of throw this on top of her and make the decision before this. But it'll be interesting to see how much May and Zuko we actually do get in the book. But for now, here is a little bit of their back and forth. You want me to what? Teach the first year students at the Royal Fire Academy. So that makes complete sense. She's coming in here as a new teacher, you know, teach the youngest students, basically, which also would put her in charge of like Kiyi, of course. You were the first person I thought of, May. Sure, when you think of, you know, wrangling kids, choose the person who hates people. And of course, Michi, her mother in the background, is like, you don't hate people, you deeply care for them. Have you met me? It's just an act. I know you have a sensitive heart underneath all that gloom. You're great with Tom Tom. You know, he's my brother, I have to be nice to him. And then Zuko kind of counters, I think, in a good way, because it's him and the drama surrounding his family. Considering how my sister treated me, I don't think being related to someone is any guarantee you'll be kind to them. True, but there's another reason I need you at that school. And I'm wondering what he goes on to say to her here. Like, is this specifically, I want you to watch over Kiyi? Or is this, could you investigate sort of and report back to me on the inner workings of the academy? Like, what is the headmistress doing or trying to maybe like lean towards? Are my reforms, I guess, actually being like followed and being agreed to? So is there a partial like spy kind of thing going on here? Or is he just going to add on, you're in charge of the first year students, could you also specifically focus on Kiyi? It'll be interesting what actually happens there. But anyway, another one of these kind of like typos. NOA, Headmistress Pearl. I'm wondering, is that just like, did they put in there something like that NOA stands for like name not decided yet or something like that, and they just recently swapped that out before the preview pages went out? So anyway, the previous Headmistress Pearl isn't still teaching, is she? She's got to be at least 100 years old by now. No, she's retired, but I like having her portrait close by. She left me some of the honors she received from Fire Lords Ozai and Sozin as a reminder to uphold the majesty of the Fire Nation's long history. And May says, the less we uphold from Ozai and Sozin's reign, the better the Fire Nation will be. I will at this point point out, should it not be Ozai and Azulon and not Sozin? Because it's kind of weird that they're pointing out that you got honors from the last Fire Lord, Ozai, and then you got honors from not the one before Ozai, which would be Azulon, his father, but the one before that, Sozin. And it's like, is there a reason you're not mentioning Azulon here, or did you just put Sozin in because that's the first other Fire Lord who came to mind? I'd be very interested to see how that goes, because are you just referencing 2 Fire Lords and it actually could be more? Or is this actually a mistake overall? Now, the question here is, okay, the headmistress is 100 years old. What does that actually mean? Because technically, if she's 100 years old, if you go all the way back, that would mean that Sozin actually would still be alive. But unless this character is like 120 or plus, to the point where she's old enough to be a headmistress or involved in the academy to get an honor 100 years ago, it doesn't actually make sense. So my assumption with this one is that it should be Ozai and Azulon. But we'll see what actually happens there, if that one gets caught, or if it goes on to become another like Roku kind of comet error type thing where it doesn't get caught. I'd be hopeful of it hopefully getting caught, just because as we can see, there's stuff like this that isn't going to get through. The note from the previous couple of pages, not going to get through. But yeah, Fire Nation history is important. That's why I'm here, to make sure these kids are learning exactly what happened during the 100-Year War. Have a wonderful day. So the headmistress is obviously one of these people who seems a little bit like opposed to incorporating like the true kind of history of what has happened to the other nations during the kind of war period. Will be interesting to see like what the situation here is, because there is a sense of like, from the description of the book, like Zuko's suspicions about the headmistress is a bit of a plot point. So is she secretly working for Ozai, or is there some other angle they're going for here? I don't really know. But anyway, we move on to there's 3 pages to go. Next page, so we cut to May teaching. You can see she has a new outfit here as a teacher here, which looks pretty cool. And what she says here: imagine spending your whole life underground in total darkness, never knowing there's a completely different world out there. And when you finally get to see that world, you only get a week to enjoy it. So it's obviously she's talking rather directly about the life cycle of this particular insect. But I'm guessing the wording and the fact that it's such a long piece of dialogue is meant to be viewed kind of, you know, symbolically to a certain degree, thematically within the context of the book. What we're already bringing up in some of the preview pages already is the idea of the Fire Nation youth, especially in the schools, have been kept in the dark about the true history of, like, especially like the Air Nomad genocide and stuff like that, and what the Fire Nation has done. And now it's the idea of, to a certain degree almost, there's only a short period of time for us to make it clear to you guys that that's not correct. Like, we have to get through this, like, incident in a way surrounding this, the curriculum change, that this needs to go through. The Fire Nation needs to kind of evolve and be aware about what has happened here. Because, again, referencing the headband, we know what happened when Aang went to school, and that they viewed the Air Nomads as having an army, and that it was just a typical battle in a war versus it being a genocide and just an attack on the peaceful air nomads, basically. But anyway, we can see here, she's showing them the insect, but then she looks at the books, which is, I suppose, what the lesson is maybe meant to be. This is typically how they do things, is just read about it. Or do we go outside and make it more of a practical exercise? And she's just like, yeah, let's go outside and catch bugs. Let's have some fun here. And of course, as we cut to the next page here, the kids are having fun. And the headmistress is like, what were you doing outside? I was teaching them about these beetles, and how will learning about these beetles enable the children to become leaders of the Fire Nation. And I really like May's responses here, and the contrast between May, who is in line with the new way to do things in the Fire Nation, versus the headmistress who's stuck in the past. It probably won't, but so what? They're kids. Like, Kiyi is like 6 or something like that, 6, 7 years old or something like that. We don't know her exact age, but that's the idea here. Like, it's those age of kids. Like, do we really need to, as is being thought here, focus on discipline above all else, teaching them about the art of war and politics above all else, rather than this other stuff? And I like that May's response is just like, actually, I don't think they do. And that this is going to be, I guess, this clash across the book, and it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Again, what is the angle of the headmistress? Is she just there to represent the kind of old school way of thinking, or is there more to it? And then May, we know that May is actually the focus character of this book. It's technically, as an individual character, it's considered to be her one shot. Is being a teacher, are they setting up May to be potentially a future headmistress of the academy, that she actually is good with kids and can be a good teacher and actually gets the idea of what they're trying to do in the schools going forward? that's interesting, because that's what they're trying to do with this book, is show us May's path post-series, basically. So then we cut to the last page of the preview. So she's helping Kiyi along the tightrope. Liwa wants to go next. And then this is where we get the big stuff here. We know there's going to be flashbacks in this book to May and Azula at the Academy, plus Ty Lee, I guess. And this is how they come about. Kiyi, of course, asks May, hey, you knew my sister Azula for when you were at the Royal Fire Academy. What was she like? So what was she like while she was here? And May, of course, we know how she feels about Azula. It's kind of tough memories to remember all of this stuff in reflection. And we start to go into it here, where we get Azula with May. So they're together. No Ty Lee just yet. I'm wondering, are we going to see her meet Ty Lee? But apparently she confronts someone called Hong. And they're like, hey, what do you want? And I'm guessing we're going to see maybe Azula beat someone up, or really use her influence to kind of get ahead in some sort of a way, and kind of highlight, okay, she's adapted a little bit too easily to the harsh kind of way they do things in the Academy. But still, I think it's fascinating, the whole Kiyi wanting to know about her sister angle. And I'm very interested to see if they explain, for instance, like, has she asked Zuko much about Azula, her mother much about Azula? Is Azula a little bit off, like, you don't talk about her, and maybe she feels she has to go to someone like May, who's not directly part of the family but knew Azula very well, and this is maybe one of her few ways to properly learn about her sister. And then I think this is one of the big things in the book, is that we want to sort of know how does Kiyi view Azula, given that she knows a certain amount about what happened. She was technically kidnapped by her. This is, I think, a cool kind of dynamic in the book, that we're seeing that, of course, May is going to be the focus. We obviously have some Zuko stuff in the background, but Kiyi is actually the one who's front and center on the cover, and it's about, like, her first days at the Academy. We're going to get some stuff with her as well. We do need to characterize her well. I don't think we're going to go down the approach of having Kiyi turn out like Azula, but I think they have to do some sort of a character dynamic to highlight that. I don't know, are they going to actually properly highlight that, okay, actually reflecting on this, the Academy is partially responsible for how Azula turned out the way she did, combined with, say, like, for instance, the influence of Ozai, that sort of things, the way the Fire Nation was expected to be during those times. Maybe there is actually hope for Azula. Is that going to be part of how they wrap up the almost like Azula subplot that's present here? I'm fascinated to see what they do there, but I think it looks very promising from these 10 pages. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. They show us Ursa. We haven't seen Ursa in a while. We haven't seen Zuko in a while in a comic. They show that. It's the return of Kiyi. It's the return of May. We get to see Kiyi doing some fighting. We're addressing stuff as it relates to, of course, the Fire Academy, but also, I suppose, just education in the Fire Nation, and the continued transition of the Fire Nation into its kind of post-war version under Zuko. And of course, Zuko and May. Their relationship is something that people are obviously going to be very interested to see. The big question, though, is there time in a one-shot comic to do particularly giant progress with this? Like, is the book going to end with them back together or not? Or are they just going to plant a few seeds and they'll wait to do those reveals kind of elsewhere? It's a little bit unclear, because sometimes the scope of a one-shot comic is quite large, sometimes it's a little bit smaller. This seems to be on the bigger end of things, so I wouldn't rule out them doing something big, but it's obviously super difficult to predict and call. So, that's been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this. 10 pages from Ashes of the Academy, out March next year. What do you think about this? Obviously, I think a lot of people have been excited about this after the announcement, but how do you feel about it now that we've actually got to see some of the pages? But yes, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.